Let's take you across again to a different part of the G20 venue, the Bharat Mandapam and the Media Centre. We have our colleagues Sakal Bhatt and Shubhendu Ghosh joining us from there.
So, thank you very much, Gautam and Munmun. Once again, a very good afternoon to the viewers of DD India from across the globe. It might not be afternoon in any other part of the continent, but it's been very, very historical and unprecedented the way it's been curtains down in this edition of G20 under India's presidency in terms of tangible outcomes and many firsts associated with it. We'll continue to talk about it and decode what it really brings for the people of the country and for the world by and large. But before that, we must once again remind our viewers of DD India that we're bringing to you this live broadcast, DD India Live, from the very venue, G20 venue in Mandapam. I'm Sakal Bhatt, and with me is my colleague Shubhendu.
Thanks very much, Sakal. Yes, we are right outside Bharat Mandapam, the venue of the G20, and with such diverse outcomes of the G20 Delhi Declaration, we are trying to get as many perspectives as we can on the road ahead as far as the G20 grouping is concerned and the significance of this engagement. A very special guest now joins us, David Pfeier, senior journalist from a leading German newspaper. Now, the name of the newspaper is difficult to pronounce, but thankfully it's called SZ.
He can pronounce it.
David, you know, when we're getting into the G20 past many months, it's a polarized world with conflicts, with climate crisis, the post-pandemic world. With all these challenges, how do you see the New Delhi Declaration has been able to unify diverse voices and diverse aspirations? Your take on that?
I think it didn't look very well on Friday when we all arrived here. There seems to be still some turmoil about what the declaration could mean, but it turned out impressively well. There seems to be a last-minute move by the Indian delegation or by the Indian Sherpa, Mr. Kant, who kind of brought everyone together and approached a very strong stance. Now we're all in this together or not.
What were your key takeaways from it?
And the key takeaways is, I think, the European Union, or the Germans especially, got kind of satisfied with the declaration of the Ukraine war, which is, of course, a major concern in Europe still, the ongoing war. But then again, for the so-called global south, all the problems that occur with that are much bigger problems. I think Mr. Jaishankar called it the 3 Fs, food, fuel, and fertilizer.
Yes.
And those are problems that concern Europe not as much as the global south, because it's in perspective, there are more richer countries. So I think that by setting the agenda on these topics very strongly and integrating the concerns of the Europeans, it got to a strong communique, and we didn't believe that on Friday arriving here.
Why was there? I can sense a bit of a, I wouldn't say a skepticism, but at the very outset, the whole apprehension about, obviously, in the particular context of Russia-Ukraine war, and the way things have turned on. By the way, the consensus on the European Union was announced on the very first day.
Yeah.
And Delhi Declaration announcement also. I mean, do you think that has been very unprecedented in the sense, the way things have fast-tracked during these 2 summitry days as compared to the other summits that you have covered? India has done it stupendously well, managing the consensus.
Yeah, I think that it has. It has a different approach. Last year in Indonesia, it was more like a running back and forth. And as far as I could tell, because it's only background information, Mr. Kant had a more direct, a more blunt approach, but he was successful. And I think the main thing is that the African Union, that it's integrated in the G20, for example.
Yes.
That is something that the German Chancellor, for example, is also, that is long overdue to do something like that. You can't have a G20 without integrating such crucial parts of the world. And I think that's a bolder move. That's just, one could say, a bigger achievement than we had last year.
What does it really do to India's global image now, post G20 chair?
Oh, that is hard to say, but I would say India has, of course, a grown or a better image, or at least or a more precise image over the last year, because people are now getting more interested in it. As a correspondent, I see that how many stories are being published or being...
Well, our Prime Minister was there in Germany last year in May.
He was?
And, yes, it was a highly successful tour.
Yeah, it was.
Given our Indian diaspora.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the Indian diaspora, for example...
And the tech skills, the Indian tech skills.
Yeah. And the tech skills and the general, I think the Indian diaspora in Germany is the one with the highest income.
Yes.
It is very good. The integration is very smooth. Very rarely that you have problems between German Christians and the diaspora, for example. So this is going quite well. Of course, there are concerns in Germany about the national politics in India, about freedom of speech, freedom of press, and such things. And those are concerns that German politicians have, and even avid German readers who know India quite well. On the other hand, the now visible success of India economically and even the moon landing was big news in Germany, that India managed to do the moon mission.
Right.
So it's... Yeah.
Right.
Well, we're aiming sun now.
Yes. A lot of issues, unfortunately, we see a greater divided world. There is a north-south divide when we talk about the global south. There's an east-west divide as well. One issue that affects us all, climate crisis, as we refer to it. We've seen even Europe experiencing extreme summers that have been rather unprecedented. But this divide vis-a-vis climate crisis is usually about who's responsible to what extent for the climate crisis, and what are they going to do about it, their share of it. And that's what sort of brings the developing countries and the developed countries almost at loggerheads. What is your take on if that gap is getting bridged, if the two sides are coming together to do something together? What is your take on this crisis and the manner in which the responsibilities are divided?
I don't have a particular take on that. I think that Germany or Europe in general, people are very concerned about the climate crisis, obviously. But the global south, again, is more affected. Like we had these horrible floodings in Pakistan last year.
Part of what I meant was that climate crisis, we talk about climate finance. How is global south, developing world, poorer countries going to access those funds, resources, and technology that perhaps the developed world has access to and needs to share and has promised to share, but hasn't happened? So that's the concern.
That's going to be interesting stuff for the next G20s, I think, as well, because now we have come to a point that everybody's concerned about it, but the West or the global North is having the technology, is having a lot of money, gained a lot of money during the last decades, while polluting the world to a certain extent. Now other countries are suffering from it, and they need assistance. They need money. They need technology. They need know-how. So one has to work together in that regard, because that's a global problem. Like the biggest global problem we are facing, we can only solve it together. But it will be about who's given how much and who's getting how much, and how stable these countries are that are getting any money. And Germany is, I think, one of the countries with that will give a lot of money, but it also has a high emission rate per person, not as a country.
Before we just let you go, a final one, very quick one rather. As a journalist, what are you taking back from the summit? I mean, covering G20 summit under India's presidency.
I'm taking back a pleasant surprise that it went well. I wasn't expecting that, and a totally different impression of Delhi, because it was no honking, no traffic. It was very different than the last times I was here.
Right. On that note, David, thanks very much for joining us here on DD India. The perspective coming in on the diverse takeaways of the G20s. Back to our colleagues in the DD studio.
Well, thanks, Shubhendu, as well as Sakal, for joining us.